Good morning, everyone. I hope everybody is well. Thank you so much for your patience. Just when I think I personally have worked out all the technological kinks on my end, I always discover something new. Trustee Mackey, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Call to order the Education Committee meeting for the Oak Cliff Chamber of Commerce. As you know, over the last month or so, we and educational institutions, as well as economic institutions, municipal institutions, have been faced with a lot of realities as it relates to managing through and leading through the COVID-19 pandemic and what those challenges have meant for various organizations. I know we at the City of Dallas have tried to experience this in a way that makes sure that we take care of employees as well as their families. And so this morning we thought it appropriate, and I'm not going to take a lot of time, and we'll take care of our housekeeping items later. We thought it appropriate to extend an invitation, and Trustee Mackey so graciously agreed to just come and share with us from an educational perspective how the school district is working through these challenges and what we can do individually and collectively to ensure continuity and making sure that Oak Cliff remains the great place it is to both live and learn. And so with that, Trustee, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you all for having me. It's an honor to be here, to be able to talk about some of the things that Dallas ISD has been doing as we've moved forward, and what this has looked like for school districts across the nation that in a matter of roughly a week went from not, we'll see how this unfolds to we're going to be closed indefinitely, and had to switch the entire educational paradigm on its head to go about and do that. So Dallas ISD, which serves a little over 153,000 kids, during spring break, essentially, the decision was made to close indefinitely. And a lot of the work over the last month since then has been around two major buckets. Number one is what you just mentioned, taking care of the human element. That's both employees, that's students, that's families. That is, how are we all going to make it through this crisis as one community intact together? And so that's looked like a couple things. So let me just throw a few stats around kind of how Dallas ISD has had to shift the entire operations to support students, families, and teachers. So number one, schools we know are a primary source of food for a lot of our families, offering usually breakfast, lunch, and an afternoon snack for students. Over the last month, the entire food service operation has shifted to pick up meals, along with a partnership with DART that includes dropping off meals at certain DART locations that have been identified. And over this last month, they've served over 1.5 million meals to families, which is just a stunning number. I believe last week the number was they served over 500,000 meals alone. And so that is just an incredible number to think about. The heroes that are on the front line, the cafeteria workers, the volunteers, people handing out foods. It is incredible to see that. And in fact, our cafeteria worker, T.W. Brown, and her colleagues were featured in Time Magazine this past week. You might have seen that. Additionally, on the human element, food is an absolutely critical foundation of that. But we're starting to realize more and more so in this economy, and it's starting to become crystal clear that so is internet access and being able to use a device. And not all of our families have that access. If you are in those parking lots at schools for lunch distribution, you will also see some families parked in cars trying to access the district Wi-Fi. And so Dallas ISD has also been working to really get out devices and internet access to families that don't have it at home. And over the last month, they've handed out over 90,000 devices and just over 9,000 hotspots for families to already use and access the internet. And this has all resulted in, we've had over 98% of our families and students in Dallas ISD be able to personally check in with teachers and be able to access that learning. So the final part of that is, how do we think about our employees in this what's that?
No, I was switching.
Oh. And how do we think about our employees and our staff who pour out their heart and souls every single day in this livelihood? And so Dallas ISD took the move to make sure that we extend an emergency leave for all of our employees for as long as this crisis lasts. That includes everyone from principals and teachers and counselors to cafeteria workers, crossing guards, to Dallas Police Department, et cetera. All of the different people who are full-time employees are being kept and continuing to operate in this emergency leave environment where they're still working, but they're working from a distance. And we're trying to work with them, knowing that they are humans with kids at home a lot of times, have a lot of other things that are coming at them. And so we want to make sure that they can balance that as well. So that's the human element. The second part is the education element. And that is, how do we now go from offering classes in person, like we've done for years and years and years and decades, essentially all of our existence, to, in the matter of a week and a half, transitioning to fully online blended learning. And I know our teachers, counselors, principals, assistant principals, they've done heroic work to try to figure that out. Obviously, there's a lot of moving parts of that and false starts and things we try and it doesn't quite work, etc. But I have just seen some incredible creativity and passion come out through that. And so Dallas ISD, we've been working through a lot of the policies around how do we support schools and campuses that are able to do that. So for instance, Dallas ISD did make the decision to still collect a grade this semester, but that grade won't count for class rank or GPA or anything like that, because we know students are in very different places in terms of what they can do. If they're at home taking care of siblings and their parents are still working, they're not going to have time to be able to access the school in the exact same way that they would have before. So we recognize that. And the reasoning for having some sort of grading system there is so kids can get feedback, but more importantly, so that kids that happen to fail in the first semester or be struggling in the first semester have a chance to bring that grade up. So we won't penalize them for having struggled in the first semester. If they couldn't get a grade this semester, if it was pass-fail, they would fail that class. And so this is a way to balance that need without penalizing anyone who truly can't access the content. There are a ton of other supports around for schools to be able to do what they need to do to support their students. So teachers are working with their students directly, checking in, setting it up where they only offer one grade per week and kids can kind of go and retake that and look through that. So it's really flexible for the student end and the teacher end on that. And then also continuing to offer other services, mental health counseling and social emotional learning supports. Our counseling department in Dallas ISD and counselors across the board have been putting together check-ins, have a referral form, are still operating from afar because we know that this crisis has exacerbated and kind of brought forward a whole lot of mental health issues or whatnot that might have been lurking just below the surface. And now this is bringing them out. And so we want to make sure that we can respond to those needs of our students, regardless of what situation they're in. So that's a little bit about the work that Dallas ISD has done. I could pause there and take questions, or we could start talking about kind of the future and where this is going to go from there. So up to you, Jared.
Yeah, sure. Trustee Mackey, let's pause here and just go around the room and see if there are any questions kind of about the human element and kind of where the district is right now in its initial response to this crisis.
Sure.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Hi, Ben, this is Pam Nicholson. I live in North Oak Cliff and one of your constituents. So really thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate it. I'm a 20-year veteran fourth grade teacher. And I'm currently working with SMU in the research, the Center on Research and Evaluation. So I've kind of been in touch with some of my colleagues there, and they came up with a couple of questions. And I'll start with this one, if it's okay. It sort of speaks to what you just said about how the troops have really rallied around figuring out the best way to offer the online education. So to that point, what plans does DISD have, if any yet at this point, to implement any kind of revised or a more robust screening and assessment at BOY in order to fully understand how the disruption affected the learning progress? Like, is that something that DISD is able to work on yet? Think about the beginning of the year assessments?
Yeah, and so I think, finding the right balance of what assessment we should use and how we should use it so it's not intrusive, but it gives us good data to be able to use to help our kids has been a thing that Dallas ISD has been talking about and kind of going over for quite a bit. they actually made a big shift this year that'll kind of get to this, and that's around moving towards the NWEA MAP assessment, which is highly regarded, is used nationwide, and also not only helps you get a good sense of where kids are at the beginning of the year, English and Spanish, it also comes with like specific strands that, okay, if the student is here in this range, here are the next things they should be working on that'll be a challenge for them. Here are some things that they should have under control, but they still might be, this is on level for them, and here's the stuff they've already mastered. So I think the NWEA MAP assessment next year is going to do that in a large way, and it's also you can use it at any grade level.
So just a quick follow-up question, Ben. Giving the map makes a whole lot of sense. But do you think DISD is going to do the end of year, like I guess they'd already done probably fall and winter. So do you think they'll, in the fall, instead of doing the BOY, do you think they'll do the EOY?
I see. I haven't heard anything from them on that. I'm sure they're discussing what that could look like. I think a lot of the assessments can be taken and are taken virtually. So I think there's a way in which that we will be able to, have a push for students to be able to take that this year, on regular schedule, based on the amount of devices that they've given out. And that we might not be able to get everyone, but I think, the 98.8% check-in rate that we've had is really high, and we're proud of that. So I think there is a chance that they'll be able to fit that into the end of the year, right along regular.
Oh, that's a great idea. I think that would give them a whole lot of valid information, kind of where the kids might be starting in the fall.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Anyone else? Trustee Mackey, I'm not hearing any, but I did have a quick question. What's the district learning about instances in which the parent work and care for the child and the day-to-day, care, it meets a conflict because of work or other obligations? And how is the district providing services and kind of around people who find themselves in that situation?
Yeah. So I think this is, again, this pandemic, I think, has really made very clear a lot of situations that were already happening that just weren't in our purview, from like digital divide to the disparity between responsibilities that students have. So I think this situation has definitely thrown everyone into a sense of, trying to find a new normal. And so you definitely have situations where, the siblings that usually are at school are all at home. The parents are still considered essential workers and are still working in a number of fields and need that paycheck. And therefore, students are left to manage and take care of themselves and make sure they're still accessing that learning. So Dallas ISD is working. That's why our teachers, our counselors, everyone is doing as much as they can to check in individually with students on a weekly basis and see how they're doing, what's going on, how can we help, and how can we adjust. And so I don't think you're ever going to take that human element that needs to happen and those bonds that need to form to be able to understand the situation for a family and for a student, that you just couldn't give a blanket response to. And so where those needs are identified, I know teachers and principals and schools are connecting those families to resources that we do have, whether it's an additional device so they don't have to share a device, whether it is, food or other kind of community organizations that can help. I think that kind of situations. I do think that far and away, the big thing that I would hope, my overarching hope for us is to realize that a lot of these issues, so take food deserts, for example, they're not going to be solved by just Dallas ISD. Buying internet hotspots is not going to be a systemic way to close the divide and make sure families have access to that and can access learning. I think we're gonna see a renewed push, and I'm really hopeful that we in Dallas kind of get on this bandwagon about how do we identify these major city disparities that impact all of us and figure out a way to move forward together. The city of Dallas, DCCCD, DART, Dallas ISD, et cetera, to really combat these and really invest in combating these problems rather than trying to put Band-Aids on it through single entity solutions.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly. All right, now we'll let you transition now to what the virtual that side.
Yeah, so I think that the big question I think everyone across America and the world, frankly, is asking, it's like, how will this change education going forward? I saw an article yesterday that said, if we don't, if a vaccine isn't found quickly, social distancing could be something that's around till 2022. I mean, we're talking about even if we manage to flatten the curve here in Texas like it has been and start to reopen pieces of the economy, it's going to look different than it did before. And that definitely includes schools, which are inherently large gatherings of hundreds and thousands of kids in the same place. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think anyone has an answer for what that's going to look as we move through the rest of this year. But just the physical landscape of how school operates, I can see a world in which we move towards, there is some balance between blended learning, online learning. We need to prioritize this as being a really effective measure and finding a way forward that works for students and families, because it could very well, we could go back to school in the fall and then there's a spike sometime in November and we say, hey, it's going to be 3 more weeks of sheltering in place. And we've got to be ready to adapt for that. So I think what you're going to see is this idea of like, how do we make sure we have that ability and skill to be able to just turn on very quickly as we move forward. I also think, you talk about what it would take to transition a school from a fully in-person school to fully online. And most people would tell you, hey, like I'll need a planning year for that, or at least a couple months to plan for it and get everything all set up. And here you have enormous systems that in a week and a half move to fully online from fully in person. And that's like, it's akin to, just getting thrown in and dropped off in a foreign country with a different language that you don't speak, and just, you got to do it and figure it out, and you'll learn it a whole lot faster. And I think that's what you're seeing is like there's not a backup plan to go back to regular in-person classes yet. So people are really experimenting and trying things about this. So while I don't know, Dallas ISD hasn't communicated here.
I can put on headphones so you don't have to get bothered.
Okay.
So what it means is, like, well, Dallas ISD, we haven't made any decisions about, hey, this is what it's going to look like.
I don't think I can plug that into my phone.
Oh, it's a flat.
Yeah.
There is, I know schools and teachers are already thinking about, hey, what, I've already started to make these videos. What if I continue to make videos that instruct each of my lessons? And how do I hold a repository to that? So if a student is at home sick, they can access the videos from that day. Or if we're all home and it's sheltering in place, how do we access that and move and adapt that way? So I think you're going to start.
I left the ketchup cups.
The different ways to think about instruction and how we set schools to really align with blended learning and the ability to go online at a moment's notice. And then I think long-term, I think you'll start to see some districts start asking the question, why is learning constrained between the hours of 7 and 4 during the day? Right now, we can set it up where people say, hey, we want to actually, I've got a lot of responsibilities I got to take care of in the morning. That's when my wife works and I got to be with the kids. But in the evening, perhaps, I'd be much more aligned to doing virtual check-ins with students between the hours of 4 and 8 p.m. And when students are doing homework, they could reach out to an expert and ask questions about it. I think you'll see school systems start to look at how we do the regular times differently. How do we lengthen the day for students to be able to have access to experts? I think you might see systems move towards, why do students have to come at the same time? Maybe a student comes in the afternoon and goes to school from 12 to 8, and that's their choice. I think you'll see items around that start to manifest as people discuss that, realizing that, we've been for a long time, really just for a lot of factors, been between the hours of 7 and 4 p.m. And that's kind of when the school day happens. And we kind of move along with that. I think this has given permission to rethink how we structure schools, why classes are exactly 48 minutes long or 90 minutes long or whatever they happen to be at that school. And you'll start to see people say, hey, actually, we're going to try to move to where kids have these classes where here's the content that they're going to need to get for the day. They can order it how they like. They can kind of look through that. They can choose which one they want to do first. I think, you've opened opened the floodgates and built the foundation for teachers and schools to feel comfortable doing that. And now you're going to start to see continued creativity and iteration on that. So where it goes, I don't have any specifics for what's going to happen in Dallas ISD next year. I do think every school district across America and the world is really going to need to be prepared to be able to fold back into online learning for a couple of weeks at a time, or think differently about how you set up classes so you don't have 28 kids packed in a classroom or anything like that. I think long term, we could see a whole lot of different things come out of this.
Can you hear me, Trustee? Yes. So as you were talking, it caused me to think that, you know, public education probably hadn't had to reimagine itself in such a quick order in the history of existence, right? Since compulsory, you know, public school education has come online, it has traditionally been between those kind of standard hours, you know, 7 on the early end, 4 on the late end. And I think that public education's response is a testament to how teachers on a daily basis have to quickly react, be spontaneous, and make sure they preserve the integrity of the instructional input. And I think it just shows that at the highest level and at the largest level. Do you think that because of this crisis, because of what we've learned, because of the questions that we were being forced to ask ourselves, that we could very well find ourselves in a totally reimagined framework sooner than we ever thought, in terms of how we think about getting instruction and going to school, to your point? I mean, more on a permanent basis, notwithstanding any other threats.
Absolutely. I think that'll be a new reality. I don't think it'll be immediate. I think we will have a transition period where we go back to school buildings and we start to have this conversation between, hey, I was trying this when my students were online, and I thought I had to do it this way, and I really don't have to. I've got these whole different ideas, and I feel a lot more comfortable with it. And I think you'll see it start to kind of snowball from there. But I do truly believe, based on this pandemic, education in large forms and fashions will be different when we come back and find a new normal than it was prior.
You know, we're here at the Chamber. We have a unique place in that we are passionate about education, but also we have to be forced to recognize the economic realities and how those two, you know, interplay with each other. What thoughts do you have for us as an education committee to be thinking about how we should be thinking about that interaction at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree that education and the wider economy and jobs market are inextricably linked. And when you think about it, like, I don't know about any of y'all's experience. I know from my own personal experience, even growing up in a household with 2 college-educated parents, you know, it's still, after high school ended, it felt like a total chasm. And then I started college and didn't quite know what to expect. And then after college, there was a total chasm, and I didn't know quite what to expect before entering the workforce. And like those chasms, I mean, that was steep for me, coming with all the benefits of having college-educated parents who could talk me through that, et cetera. It was still deep. And so we lose a lot of brilliant minds and students in transitions there that inhibit the workforce as well. And you know, there's plenty of industries that are struggling for enough qualified workers to come in and help pick up these reins. We're going to have massive retirements over the coming years. And so I think it's incumbent on us as a school system and as a community, more importantly, how do we tighten those connections to make sure students not only see the path and can understand and what the path looks like. It's not just another big unknown that's coming one of these days, but also feel comfortable and secure taking that and knowing that they've got options. And so some of the things I'm really excited about, Dallas ISD, you know, we're having the conversations right now and are really moving towards creating these career institutes. We have these early college programs that help ease the transition for students who can go to high school and get an associate's degree at the same time. But these career institutes look at those fields that are the fastest growing in the area. Things like mechatronics, database management, auto mechanics, HVAC, industrial HVAC, et cetera. which have huge shortages of workers in them, pay better than an undergraduate degree on average when you come out of high school, with large room to grow. We just don't have good pipelines for it. And so these career institutes will help students would also still be at high school and go through the regular classes that they'd be taking. They can even move towards preparing for college at that point, and half the day they would spend for a couple of years at this career institute, really gaining a trade and a skill that is very tailored to the DFW area, which is growing super fast. But the only way that happens is when outside organizations help plug into that. And so community partners and businesses step up and say, hey, we've got a need for this. We want to help out. We're willing to invest. And we want to take on some students that can be part of our training pipeline and kind of get these skills along the way. And if they choose to work for us, great. But the only way that happens is together with the wider community. So that hasn't just been a Dallas ISD thing. The only reason that career institutes or these PTECs would work is because we have these, I think, well over 1,000 partners of businesses, small and large, that are saying, hey, this is important. We want to invest in it. And that's truly what matters, both from a large organizational perspective, but also community members who don't have kids in the system necessarily, but they live next to a school, getting involved at that local level as well and saying, hey, I live in the neighborhood, how can I help out? That goes a long way. As someone who has been a former principal and a teacher, that was enormous when people would come up and say those types of things.
Absolutely. And I think that from a community perspective, we oftentimes think of the little ones. And we initially react to those needs there, but I think to the excellent explanation you just provided, we also have to look after what do we do about students who are graduating and entering the job market, and how do we protect those opportunities and ensure those opportunities are still there for those students, because we've seen the great work that is being done in that area, and how do we protect that in light of these economic uncertainties. How do we keep that momentum going? And I think that's the opportunity that all of us here kind of around this phone, particularly those who are connected to commerce and in education, everybody, but it's a partnership, have an opportunity to do that. I'll go around the phone to see, or around the call to see if we have any questions. Going once.
Hi, this is Dr. Westbrook. I'm at Kingston, and I just want to add to what Ben just shared. Well, I'm trying. Just to make sure anybody in the community that wants to be a mentor would be a huge help at the school level. We're talking about these organizations, these businesses that support us on a grander level. But even just an individual, you're talking about the one that lives right next to the school, just coming over, say, hey, give me one person to mentor would be phenomenal.
Thank you. I agree.
Thank you so much. You do.
Likewise. Any others? All right. Trustee Mackey, any parting words of thought that you'd like to with us? We definitely thank you for your time today. Wanted to just, if you had anything you just want to leave us with.
Yeah, I think, the first in the short term is stay safe, stay healthy, stay home. This will pass in its current form. And I think when it does pass, though, we will have, a lot of the problems, the disparities, the things in our city that we really need to grapple with if we want to see Dallas continue to accelerate, like the digital divide, like food deserts. We need to figure out a way to really combat those as a community collective and not as individual entities. I've had a lot of people reach out about, hey, can the school district, you guys are doing great feeding kids. Can you all also feed the whole families? And it's like, yeah, we'd love to, but it can't just be a Dallas ISD solving this problem thing. This is a community. We've got to do this together. And so I just hope that all of us, as we start to come out of this and start to return to a different kind of new normal, that we really think about those. I think one really exciting thing that I want to put a plug in for is, Dallas ISD is moving towards a bond in 2020. That will be a really needed bond for a lot of things. Right now, we'd be in the middle of community meetings if we were able to have those in person. I know Dallas ISD is moving to some virtual meetings to try to get a lot of community input, even though we can't congregate in person. So number one is I'm going to be sharing those out as soon as those meetings are set. Would love to get as many people giving input and talking about that as possible, and really exploring what that could look like and how that should look like, because that can go a long way to helping to address some of these. And there's actually one unique provision currently being discussed as part of the bond, which is this idea around joint projects. And it takes the idea that, it's really hard for, Dallas IC to say, hey, we want to solve the digital divide. City, do you have a bunch of money that you could help put towards this? That's a hard thing for large organizations to do. But you look at aspects of our city where we have had meaningful collaboration between large government organizations. So I think about Brashear Elementary and Arcadia Park Elementary, which are jointly located with city libraries. Both the city and Dallas ISD save money. The city doesn't have to staff it to the same level and capacity and doesn't have to pay all the overhead costs of the building. Dallas ISD takes on a lot of that. Dallas ISD doesn't have to spend money on refreshing a library all the time. It has extra personnel from the city that are able to do that. There are some of the most well-attended libraries that we have in the city of Dallas, and they were the only two libraries that were able to stay open during the recession of 2009, 10, and 11, full regular business hours. It just works where we find those things, but the only reason that happened is because the two organizations of Dallas ISD and the city just so happen to be on the right timeline and have funding already identified to do that project. So I say that to say there's a provision in the bond for joint projects. And it's a small one as an experiment at this point, but I think it could be something that could be really meaningful and even grow, which is to set aside a sum of money. I believe it's $25 million right now, that is used for joint projects like that with other large government entities, like DCCCD, like DART, like the city of Dallas. And it would have to go through a vetting process and what that would look like. But it would allow organizations, Dallas ISD could basically come out to the rest of the city and say, hey, we're going to put aside this amount of money. If in your next bond, you come and match us, then we're going to have twice that money to be able to really do some joint projects. We can really talk about closing the digital divide or finding a way to combat food deserts, because that falls in all of our lanes. It's not just one of ours, but we can do that together. And that's the only way we can actually do it. So it's also really low risk in that if no good projects materialize or there's not something there, we can put that right back into other bond projects. And it's no harm, no foul. So I think about things like that. Obviously, there's details that need to get talked about, but I think we need to be open and willing to think about how do we really hold our governmental institutions accountable for working together on these problems and not continue to operate in their same silos that are so hard to break down, not for any individuals not wanting to. It's just organizational inertia. It's really hard to overcome. So how are we thinking differently about that coming out of this crisis? And how are we not letting off the gas on that as soon as we go back to a relative new normal?
Thank you for that. I'd like to just throw in really quick. I encourage everyone to pick up the Time magazine featuring Brown Middle School. As an alum of Brown Middle School.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, go Trojans. I encourage you all to do that. Thank you so much, Trustee Mackey, for your leadership during this time. I think the district and the city needs it, and so we thank you so very much for that leadership, both in thought and in deed. Thank you so much for coming to share with us and helping opportunities we have to better support public education in the district and the students it serves. So thank you so much for your time this morning sharing with us.
It's absolutely my pleasure. I'm going to leave my email and my phone number in the group chat. Would be happy to chat with anybody. If you got further questions or want to connect about something, would love to chat with you. And look forward to grabbing a coffee with y'all as soon as we're able to again.
Yes. I think we're all longing for that contact. No, thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Just for the good of the order, just one additional business item I want to make sure we just cover is that, we were planning annually our Golden Oak Scholarship, but due to scholarship ceremony, and this year we had planned to do it in conjunction with our PCT graduation, or Cliffworks graduation. It's going to do it at Hit Auditorium at Methodist Hospital, but for obvious reasons that I don't have to keep saying it, that we're unable to have that program this year. Orlando, anything you want to add that I'm leaving out regarding our Golden Oaks scholarship?
No, I do not, but we will be in contact with those who have applied via the educators and the students, and letting them know that unfortunately we will not be able to give out scholarships this year, but to continue to promote it for next year, and hope that we just have increasing numbers of participants who deserve to be mentioned.
All right. Thank you for that, and as always, thank you for your support in helping us coordinate those efforts programmatically and administratively. Orlando, I appreciate you as chair. It's kind of a bummer. The one time I had the opportunity to chair the education committee, there is no Golden Oaks scholarship ceremony due to something beyond our control, but we definitely understand and want to make sure we continue to do good there. Any other questions, comments, or items from the committee or anybody here on the call? Hearing none, thank you all again so much for your time this morning. I think this has been particularly insightful and helpful. And again, thanks to Trustee Mackey for taking time out of his busy schedule to join us this morning. I know that we're all trying to do our part to make sure we, continue our best educational efforts and economic efforts, and we do it together. And I think that Trustee Mackey was very eloquent in saying that I think we get through this together. I think it illuminates opportunities for us to reimagine the way we do things and take those lessons learned into a new environment. And so with that, I thank everybody for calling in this morning, and stay safe, and we shall gather again. I'm sure we will probably still be in this environment, but all the same, stay well, stay safe, and please contact us at the chamber if you have any questions or anything like that. Thank you all.